Imagine for a second a universe where every single piece of advice you give someone and every ounce of love you show a newborn baby is actually governed by an incredibly strict, totally invisible rulebook. Well, today in this explainer, we're diving into a really unique spiritual framework from a Jungbub lecture that lays out these exact cosmic laws. We're going to impartially map out the spiritual manual, looking at everything from the intense protocols you apparently have to follow if you want to offer someone spiritual guidance, all the way to a deeply mystical explanation for the origins of postpartum disease. It's a truly fascinating look at how one specific worldview structures human interactions, karma, and literally, even our physical health.
So here's what's on the agenda today. First, we'll look at the rule of guidance. Second, unpacking postpartum disease. Third, the departure of the gods. And fourth, children belong to heaven.
All right, let's jump straight into part one, the rule of guidance and the strict etiquette of spiritual counseling.
This whole framework really builds its foundation by drawing a massive line in the sand between two very different approaches to helping people. On one side, you have what's described as a fake fortune teller. You know the type. Someone who listens to you pour your heart out and then just instantly hands over a superficial quick fix. But a true counselor, they operate on a completely different level. They absolutely refuse to give you an immediate answer just to ease your pain in the moment. Instead, they demand rigorous foundational study. They literally force the person seeking help to put in the deep, agonizing effort required to understand the actual root of their issues, rather than just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms.
Now, this true counseling requires a rigid, totally uncompromising four-step process. Step one is straightforward. You have to listen completely to the person's problem without interrupting. But step two is where the real work kicks in. You assign them a mandatory 100 days of foundational study. And step three, honestly, this is probably the hardest part for any compassionate person who just wants to help. It's absolute non-interference. For that entire 100-day stretch, you cannot answer their specific questions, you can't try to fix their problems, you just have to let them struggle and learn. Finally, step four. If they actually stick to this intense study, the claim is that 70% of their issues will just naturally resolve on their own. And it's only after they hit that threshold that you're finally allowed to step in and answer whatever questions they have left.
You might be wondering, why is this 100-day rule so intensely strict? Well, it all comes down to some incredibly high karmic stakes. If a counselor just hands out a quick fix instead of demanding that foundational study, the person's underlying problems never actually go away. Their bad luck just keeps going. And here's the kicker. If you're the guide responsible for letting that cycle of misfortune continue, the universe holds you entirely accountable. You literally take on their bad karma, and you receive the punishment yourself. It's this brilliant, honestly terrifying mechanism designed to force extreme responsibility onto anyone daring to act as a spiritual guide.
Let's move on to part two, unpacking postpartum disease and a spiritual perspective on Sanhupung.
So, shifting gears within this cosmic rulebook, we're introduced to a condition known as Sanhupung. But in this lore, we're not talking about your standard medical issue that just anyone might get. It's framed as a deeply spiritual phenomenon, one that's allegedly been studied for 5,000 years in historical Korea, or Joseph. And what's really wild is that the severity and even the presence of this specific affliction are tied directly to bloodlines. The framework asserts that getting this illness fundamentally depends on the percentage of Joseon lineage you carry, which creates this highly specific cultural and spiritual pathology. To actually wrap our heads around how this illness works, we have to talk about the Samshin. These are the trinity of gods representing heaven, earth, and humanity. In this universe, childbirth is viewed as an event of extreme physical vulnerability. The mother's cellular density completely relaxes and basically separates. So the crucial job of these trinity gods is to arrive at the exact moment of birth, to actively protect her. They're there to carefully stitch her cells back together, sealing her body back up, all while making sure the newborn baby starts growing well.
Which brings us right into part three, the departure of the gods, examining the rule of ownership and spiritual vulnerability.
Okay, so if these gods are fiercely protective, why would they ever abandon a vulnerable mother? Believe it or not, it all comes down to a cosmic violation of ownership. Think about it. It is entirely natural for a mom to look at her newborn, kiss them, and just instinctively say, "This is my baby." But in the spiritual rulebook, claiming the baby as your exclusive property throws up an absolute impenetrable barrier. By declaring ownership, the mother is essentially telling the universe, "I've got this, I don't need help." And the gods, who are bound by the strict rules of this realm, suddenly can't interfere with what someone has legally claimed as their own property, so they are forced to step away.
Let's actually track how this spiritual vulnerability plays out on a timeline. So after 9 months of gestation, birth happens at hour 1, completely relaxing the mother's cellular structure. By around hour 24, profound human instinct takes over, and the mother naturally claims the child as mine. Fast forward to hour 48, and those gods, totally bound by cosmic laws of ownership, pack up and leave. This leaves the mother completely unguarded during those critical first few weeks. Because her cells haven't been properly realigned by the divine presence, this metaphysical wind is able to seep right into her misaligned body. And that spiritual exposure, that cellular friction, is presented as the literal, terrifying root cause of this postpartum illness.
That takes us to part 4. Children belong to heaven, and the path to spiritual healing.
So, how do you actually heal the body if a mother's natural love is the very thing chasing the gods away? Well, you have to shift your paradigm entirely. Instead of our modern idea of claiming a child as the absolute owner, which drives the gods off, this framework points us toward the historical practice of receiving from heaven. In this view, parents are just caretakers. By formally acknowledging that the child is entrusted to them by heaven rather than owned by them, the parents maintain the protective presence of those gods. And in return, they supposedly receive the divine strength needed to actually raise that child.
This incredibly strict rule against ownership stems from a profound philosophical definition of what humanity even is. Here, humans are seen as a unique union of animal flesh and a divine soul. And because that soul is inherently divine, it's a hard, unbreakable law of this universe that a soul fundamentally cannot be owned by another human being, not even a parent. Children are basically heaven's disciples, just temporarily entrusted to caretakers. This is exactly why the old wives' tale that having a second child cures postpartum illness is completely rejected in this lecture. Having a second, third, or 30th child won't cure a thing, unless the mother genuinely understands and internalizes this foundational spiritual law of non-ownership.
So, to invite real spiritual healing, you have to eat some serious humble pie. The prescribed method is a very specific act of repentance. The mother has to look to heaven and sincerely say, "Please forgive me, I didn't know." It is the ultimate removal of ego. By admitting complete ignorance of these grand cosmic laws of ownership, the mother dismantles that barrier she unknowingly put up. That sincere, humble apology is the key that finally allows the divine forces to return. It gives them permission to touch and heal her cellular body and push that dangerous metaphysical wind right back out.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? In the framework of this lecture, a totally natural human instinct, a mother claiming her newborn out of pure love, triggers this massive, hidden cascade of spiritual and physical consequences. It begs the question, if complex, invisible spiritual rules supposedly govern something as fundamental as childbirth and parental love, what other hidden laws might be operating in the background of our everyday lives, just waiting for us to figure them out?